Darksiders 2 was made by a game studio called Vigil Games, which doesn't exist anymore, sadly. It was part of THQ until 2012, and ironically, a game company that has death as their main character became bankrupt and doesn't exist anymore. In 2012, Vigil Games split into Airship Syndicate and Gunfire Games. The Darksiders franchise was bought by Nordic Games, and upon buying the THQ trademark, Nordic Games became THQ Nordic, which is something you might have heard of. It's sad to see Vigil Games close because the guys created a very phenomenal game, and as the producer of Vigil Games, Ryan Stefanelli, said, a game made by gamers for gamers. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. So what's the story of this game? The story is very basic. It's a save the princess type of scenario. Death wants to save his brother from imprisonment, who is innocent, while the world is approaching a cataclysm due to corruption. The corruption is black goo in tentacle form. And that's pretty much it. That's the plot. Everything else that happens in the story is just used as means to drive the game forward. The game isn't story-based, while still being very rich in lore, which might be very misleading to many people who look at the game and think, oh, it's such an awesome looking action RPG, and judging by the cutscenes, the story is awesome as well. And that is where many people burn themselves, since the game isn't about the story. However, every conversation and cutscene is done in such an interesting way that you just sit there and you're like, shh, story's happening, quiet. There isn't much of it, but what is there is very appreciated. Now, what is this game? This game is an action RPG, like I said, that uses story to drive the game forward and feeds you with tiny bits of story here and there. The game itself can be compared to a Super Mario game or a Kingdom Hearts game. Surprising, I know. What I'm talking about is the structure of the game, because you see, although it's open world like this, you could easily do this, and the game would play the same. So basically a level-based action RPG which uses its open world for traversal and its narrative to drive you forward. Is it boring? No! As far as I'm concerned, Crash Bandicoot uses that structure, Rayman Legends does it, Mario, like I mentioned before, in Kingdom Hearts, and you know what? It works like a charm. However, you need to know this when you buy the game in order to know what to expect. One of the developers, David Adams, said that they drew inspiration from games like Zelda, Prince of Persia, Ratchet & Clank. I have to say, I see a lot of Prince of Persia, I see Ratchet & Clank, but I don't really see Zelda. Yes, there are dungeons, but they're just too different from Zelda dungeons, in my opinion. Maybe it's just me. A big shout out to the art team, because the environments are just wow in this game. The environments are so seamlessly and organic, and nothing feels even remotely out of place. Every character and enemy fits in the setting they're placed in. And it's not even a matter of, oh, this environment is red, let's put a red enemy in here. No, they made original characters for their biomes, and they all fit organically without becoming repetitive or boring. Yes, some mini-bosses do repeat themselves in the game, but that's not a problem at all, since it doesn't happen very often. Speaking of which, many mini-bosses are bosses you beat in the past, and frankly, meeting that boss again and just annihilating him as an inferior being is just so satisfying. The environment itself is very beautiful, stylish, and has character. Sometimes even a door in this game has more character than some NPCs in games. That's how much passion and work and creativity has been put into making this game look original, beautiful, and magical. And sadly, there isn't that much of the environment to explore. It's set in an open world, yes, but as mentioned above, the open world is only used as means of getting from a dungeon to another dungeon, and occasionally the environment has hidden secrets with secret bosses. Thankfully, there is a fast travel function which allows you to skip the travel time if you traveled the road once already. As well as you can teleport out of dungeons, stack up on items, and return to the point you teleported from, kind of like a Diablo game. Very handy. Although each biome is enormous, I can't really say it made me feel the scale. Some monsters made me feel small, for sure, but the world didn't, because again, exploring it isn't really that important, which defeats your sense of wonder. There is essentially none. You have some areas that are interesting to look at, but most of the time they are locked behind a traversal item that you just don't have yet, and then you have to get it and return later. The world is very big, but sadly after like 2.5 hours, you just stop asking yourself what's over there, because the risk of going there and not having the traversal item yet is just so big that you just continue the story until you get all the items. Is that a bad thing? For an open world RPG? Yeah, it's kind of bad, but this isn't an open world RPG, it's just coded as one. So no, it really didn't bother me that much. Now let's talk about the dungeons, and I'm rubbing my hands because the dungeons were amazing. Dungeons were the place where I constantly asked myself the question, what is over there? What is that? What if I jump from this ledge and kill myself? Dungeons were the place where my sense of wonder never stopped tingling, and after finishing a dungeon it becomes dangerous. You just sit there and think, I'll just enter the next one. Just one tiny look, it's just one step, I'll just tiptoe the water, right? And boom, 2 hours later we have passed the dungeon, finished it. That's how well crafted the dungeons are. It's addicting, it's that good, it's awesome. The dungeons are filled with arenas, puzzles, and interesting platforming. That's just 3 key factors, okay? But those 3 key factors are polished to such perfection that doing them for 20 plus hours, for 30 plus hours, doing a new game plus and doing them again is just so much fun. The arenas are well paced and are often destructible, which adds that aftermath effect after a fight and an enormous repair bill towards you that you don't have to pay, but feel ashamed what you did was barbaric, and it felt good. The puzzles aren't too hard and they aren't too difficult. Okay, I mean, there are some puzzles where you're not even thinking of like, how do I do this? You're just sitting there, and when you solve them, you just like, how did they even think of this? Oh my god, they're difficult at times, yes, but when you get done with that puzzle, you just feel like your IQ jumped by 300. Good feeling. Best thing is that the puzzles aren't repetitive because you always solve them with the abilities you're given. The further you progress into the game, the more traversal abilities and items you'll be given, thus more diverse puzzles. It never gets boring. The platforming works really well and isn't anything special, but it's very well paced so it doesn't become boring or over-intrusive. And the best thing about it, it works. The character jumps where you tell him to jump. Thank you, Vigil Games. At the end of a dungeon, there is usually a boss that challenges your abilities that you were taught throughout the dungeon. What do I mean by that? Like I said, the game is structured in a level-based way. The game uses that structure to teach you a game mechanic, then make you apply it, and then it tests you on the game mechanic in a boss fight. Given the diversity of game mechanics, this always keeps things fresh and challenging. Apart from normal dungeons, there are also extra dungeons and quests which will of course result in epic loot. Now I have to say that a dungeon takes at least 1 hour to finish, and it could stretch up to 2 hours depending on how you play the game, which basically means don't rush through the game and try to finish it in like 2 to 3 days. You will get burned out, it will get repetitive, and you will not enjoy it. Pace out this game, play like a dungeon a day or 2 dungeons at most, and you will enjoy it the way it was meant to be enjoyed. Now let's talk about loot. The dungeons are thankfully littered with loot. Whether you want to hit your enemies with a big axe, a spear, claws like Wolverine, it doesn't matter, you can get them all. Hammer, axe, spear, claw, fist weapon. Choose whatever you like. And the best thing is your secondary weapon. Your primary weapon are 2 scythes. These will be your primary weapons throughout the game. And at some point you will start getting top tier loot, which is called possessed weapons. These weapons are basically the crafting part of the game. You can feed possessed weapons with loot that you don't need, which will make the weapon stronger. When you feed the weapon, it will also take over some of the stats, which allows you to craft a weapon that suits your playstyle. There is of course a limit as to how much you can feed your weapons, so choose carefully which weapons to feed to your possessed weapon. And you will start with low level possessed weapons, and towards the end of the game you will get high level possessed weapons, which all look different, so there is still a reason to actually take them and play with them. I see this game mechanic both as positive and negative, since there aren't that many exclusive super duper boss weapons that you can get. In the beginning you kill a boss and you get his weapon and it's really awesome. Later you kill a boss and his weapon is just a non-option for you because you can feed your possessed weapon to be much stronger. Oh, and also a little heads up, break all the boxes in dungeons. Don't ask why, break them all and thank me later. There is also a progression system that includes 2 skill trees, a Necromancer skill tree and a Harbinger skill tree. Harbinger is a more warrior based, which gets you up close with your enemies and relies on your strength stat, while Necromancer is more magic based, allows you to keep your distance and relies on your arcane stat. However, there is no way to avoid your enemies altogether, you will have to get into the fight regardless of the skill tree you pick. The question I have is, why does the Harbinger skill tree have a cooler looking, clearly magical oriented ultimate? Why? I don't know. That's just not fair. Yes, I played the Necromancer build, you guessed it, and then I got the ultimate and it was like, what is that? That doesn't even look fun. Whatever. It was still strong, but it just looks not very impressive. It looks like, well, okay, great, cool. Speaking of stats, they will drive you nuts, I promise. It's one of those games that has such an intelligent stat system that at some point you think you get it. Then you don't get it, and then you try to get it, and then in the last quarter of the game you finally get it and you feel like you deserve a Nobel Prize for that scientific research that you did in order to get it. Needless to say, it would have been nice to have some descriptions for the stats, that would have been awesome. I didn't mind googling guides for this game, but come on! It could have been done better. I mean, it may sound bad from my description, but like I said, the stats are very intelligently done. Meaning they do matter, and in this game, using them in correct ways is just so much fun. But you'll have to read. While being on my journey to save Wrath, I couldn't shake the feeling how well the game transports the player into its world. The game is just fantastic and fits every environment you're in flawlessly. I shit you not, there was like this one boss fight, okay? And I was just circling around the boss, not hitting him, just circling around the boss, listening to the music because it was that good. Well done, Jesper Kid, you definitely gained a fan. By the way, if you're someone who played Darksiders 2 already and you watched this video, can you guess the music I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure every single person who played Darksiders 2 knows the music I'm talking about, it's just that good. The voice cast is also pretty epic, there's just no other word for it, it's epic. You got Troy Baker voicing like half of the characters. And honestly, I couldn't tell them apart, just one NPC stood out where I was like, yep, that's Troy Baker. Everything else I figured out after I finished the game, and I was like, damn, that was Troy Baker? And that's just, what a beast of a voice actor. Well done, Troy Baker. Death is voiced by Michael Wincott, who voiced, for example, Scroop in Treasure Planet, James Cosmo, who played in Troy, Braveheart, Highlander, and Chronicles of Narnia. And honestly, I could go on for days because the cast is absolutely mind-blowing and it shows. Characters are a joy to listen to, and even though most of the times they only convey simple information, it just sounds so enthralling. I loved it. Another thing that sets the tone of the narrative and importance of you being in the world is the fact that all you do has consequences, and sometimes visual consequences. Like, you're just because you messed up. It's very striking and makes you feel involved. Although, like I said, it's not a story-heavy game, you feel like the story is holding you by your hand and what you do matters. Lore plays also a very big role in the game, and you can read a lot of the lore in dungeons and in the world. For example, like I said, the world is heading towards an apocalypse due to corruption, and in one of the dungeons of a Scandinavian biome, or a Scandinavian-like biome, you see a volcano erupting, which is a Scandinavian mythology, a sign of Ragnarok, and you probably know what that is. Things like that are scattered around the world, but honestly, at some point you just get tired of the detective work, but that makes the replay value more significant, I guess, since the world constantly is talking to you. Hello everyone, today we're going to be inspecting this council meeting room of politicians, whatever it is, and we're going to have a look what they have under their tables. Money and alcohol. Even in disguise, the politicians are corrupt as Another thing that I would like to point out is that the game crashed for me once, but that was only once in 30 hours. That's it. It happened once. I didn't lose any progress, it just sort of happened. I guess errors happen, but for a definitive edition of the game, they shouldn't. There should be no errors. I will let you know though that the game loses in quality towards the end, that being the last 3 hours of the game. And I played this game for 30 hours, so like 3 hours out of 30 losing quality. It's nothing to justify, it's still not very good, but I really didn't mind it. It was still interesting, but you feel that loss of quality towards the end, sadly. One more thing I would like to talk about, and it's the Crucible. The Crucible is an arena in this game where you can fight waves of enemies and earn prizes. There are severe problems with this arena. First of all, when you participate in the arena, you have the choice to quit after every 5th wave, of which there are 100. When you quit, you earn a prize, but the wave counter resets and you have to do it all again. Every 25th wave, there is a checkpoint. And every 20th wave, you can quit, but there is a bug and you get no reward. That is a problem because 1, it's 5 waves before the checkpoint, and you might say, well, why don't you just finish the checkpoint? It's 5 waves. Which brings me to reason number 2. The jump in difficulty from 20th to 25th wave is just too significant. You must be prepared, you must know what enemies you will be facing, and you must know how you will fight them. So the first time you face the 25th wave, you will probably die because you didn't come prepared. Which brings me to reason number 3, beating those 25 waves will probably take like 25 or 30 minutes. And then dying at the end of it will just destroy all the time you spend into the game. For nothing. Which is unreasonably punishable. It is bad game design, just objectively. This could have been done better. So my recommendation to you is to go to the Crucible when you have properly maxed out stats, you feel good about your build, and you're at least level 23. Then it makes sense. Before that, you will just waste a lot of your time for no reason, without any reward. Not a very good game design. Those were some of the striking negatives. Did they influence my gameplay a lot? No. Just the Crucible did, because I burned myself really bad and like wasted 30 minutes, but everything else was pretty much fine. What I also can tell you is, there are no microtransactions. That's awesome. It's very sad that it has to be celebrated when a game doesn't have microtransactions in today's game industry, but it's the way it is. Sadly. In the end, I have to say that I can't believe I decided to skip on this game because of some bad reviews online. Don't make that mistake. Darksiders 2 is a game before it is a movie and before it is a book. It's something for you to play and to have fun with. If you're looking for a cinematic role-playing game that is story-driven, this will not be something for you. However, if you're looking for an amazing dungeon crawler with awesome puzzles, enthralling atmosphere, brilliant soundtrack, awesome lore, and you don't mind the fact that there is very little story, this game is for you. Okay, I think I said plenty. Thank you so much for watching the video. Leave me a like down below to support me, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next video. Have a nice rest of your day and goodbye.